My name is Hannah and I'm a teacher at Twinkl. Thanks for joining me for daily reading. This is the fifth in a series of 5 videos where we've been reading a story called The Man Who Bought a Mountain. Each day we've been reading a chapter of the story and then working on a reading skill. I'm going to be asking you some questions during this video, so if you'd like to write your answers down, you'll need a piece of paper, or you could download the activity sheet using the link in the description below. You can type onto that activity sheet, or you can print it out. If you haven't been reading along with us, it's best to go back and watch one of the earlier videos to catch up. If you have been reading along with us, the first thing I'd like you to do is pause the video and discuss with someone or have a think to yourself about what you can remember about the story so far. Well done. In the story so far, we've met a boy called Yash. Yash lives on the Jagurdwa mountain, and his job is to lead treks of visitors up to the base camp. On his way home from a tour, Yash visits the sage who lives on the mountain, and they talk about the power of the mountain. The sage gives Yash some wise words to think about and a job to do on his way home. A few days later, Yash takes another group up the mountain, and we meet a very unpleasant man by the name of Theodore J. Goldlaw. This man says he wants to buy the mountain and then move it to a new location. When the deal is agreed, Yash is very upset, and he is requested to take Mr. Goldlaw up to meet the sage before Mr. Goldlaw can start his planned detonations. Now, Mr. Goldlaw and Yash are on their way back down the mountainside, Yash feeling very grumpy, in time for the planned detonation, which is about to blast through the rock. Today, while we're reading, we're going to be looking at how one character can change from the start of the story to the end. So let's get reading chapter 5. 5. The return trip from the sage's dwelling looked set to be even worse than the journey up. Yash felt like running ahead and leaving Goldlaw behind, hoping that he'd get lost or fall or just turn so red that he popped. The only thing that stopped him was the feeling that all his energy had been sucked away. He just wanted to get home to his parents. On his way back down the rugged path, Yash thought about all the treks that he had made up the Jagurdwa mountain. He marvelled, perhaps for the last time, at layer upon layer of jagged rock. Here and there streaks of colour leaked across its surface, compressed like dough under a rolling pin. Yash took in all the colours and shades of the layers, bearing all that history. When he didn't point out one overhanging ledge, Goldlaw walked straight into it. Rubbing his head at the point of impact, he grunted, "Who put that there? I don't remember it being that low before." "I think you'll find that it's been there for millions of years," Yash replied wearily. Goldlaw wheeled around to face him. His expression, in which confidence was usually set like concrete, was one of surprise. He rested a hand on the dusty surface. "Surely not." Yash shook his head a little at Goldlaw's ignorance, given that he was now the owner of the land. "Just look at the layers, the different colours and rock types. The layers on top have built on those underneath, and that takes a long time." Yash ran a long finger along a thread of siltstone at eye level, and Goldlaw's gaze followed it. For the briefest moment, Yash thought that he could sense a shift in the way in which the man looked at what was all around him. Just as quickly, the spell was broken. "Come on," Goldlaw grunted. "We've been held up long enough." They walked on, returning to silence. Below, the peaceful beauty of the mid-hills gave way to the lower regions, the rushing streams which provided a home for unusual fish and water for other animals, the bamboo forest with its sheltered canopy which hosted rare varieties of plants, the fields of crops which brought the whole community food, money, and life. When Yash reached the familiar makeshift bridge, he took a left turn off the well-trodden path into a wooded patch of scrubland in the other direction. Goldlaw stopped and frowned at him as he stepped lithely away. "Wait! Why aren't we taking this route back?" He pointed at the planks that made up the path across the stream. Yash scowled. "We are. I just have to do something first." "I don't have time for detours. I have a detonation planned." Breathing deeply, Yash counted to 5 in his head. "You don't have to come with me. If you think that you can get yourself back through the bamboo forest without following the wrong path, off you go. It's your mountain." Yash continued to tramp away through the undergrowth, not caring whether or not Goldlaw followed him. As far as he knew, no one but himself and the sage had ever walked this way on the mountain, and, until now, they had worked hard to keep it that way. Now, though, Yash's rage was causing him to throw caution to the wind. Goldlaw owned all of this, after all, so it was only a matter of time before their secret was either discovered or destroyed. Away from the path, the pair weaved between thickly growing birch trees. Moving neither up nor down, but across the mountainside, Yash navigated the sloped ground as easily as a duck would navigate water. Goldlaw stepped uncertainly over mossy tree roots and stumbled over limestone steps. After a few minutes, the slope of the mountain face began to level out and the trees thinned. They emerged onto a small outcrop, halfway up an enormous crease in the mountainside, where the Jagurdwa folded back on itself. It was perfectly sheltered from the wind and other elements, and overlooked the farmland and river below. There was a long, sheer drop on one side, and up ahead was a dead end. "What on earth are we doing here?" grumbled Goldlaw. He glanced at his watch. "You would better get me down this mountain in time." Yash ignored him. Instead, he crouched so low that he was almost kneeling on the dusty ground, pulling from his pocket the tightly wrapped bundle that the sage had given to him. With his other hand stretched out in front of him, he began to make a soft clicking noise with his tongue. Goldlaw stared at him, utterly perplexed. "What in the name of—" Yash shot him a furious warning look, and Goldlaw was silenced. Yash clicked a few more times, and then gave a long, low whistle. For a few moments nothing happened. Then, as Goldlaw watched in amazement, a small creature appeared from a shadowy fissure in the rock face up ahead. It was about the size of a large rabbit, and obviously very young. Grey speckled fur grew soft and downy all over the creature, from its pointed wet nose to its short stubby tail. Thin bandy legs tucked themselves timidly under its body, and enormous ears stood to attention. Two huge, glistening eyes stared around as the tiny fawn picked its way slowly towards Yash. Crossing his legs slowly, Yash seated himself on the ground and unwrapped the sage's parcel. Goldlaw peered over Yash's shoulder from his great height. From inside the small package, Yash pulled a handful of lush green leaves and yet another, even smaller parcel. Quietly he held out the bundle of leaves, and the little fawn stepped instantly towards it. It sniffed Yash's hand momentarily before folding its legs under itself and settling down beside him, blinking up at Goldlaw as it chewed. Goldlaw stared, transfixed at the tiny creature. His mouth hung open slightly as he stood on what felt like the edge of the world, gazing down at the scene unfolding in front of him. After a few minutes he swallowed, blinking, then cleared his throat quietly. "What?" Before he could ask, the soft clicking sound broke through the quiet once more. Cradling the remaining leafy parcel in his free hand, Yash continued to make soft noises with his mouth, and they waited. Goldlaw stared at the gap in the rocky wall expectantly until, eventually, they saw movement. An adult deer, perhaps 1/2 meter in height, with huge ears, small tusks on its snout, and thick brown hair all over its body, moved into the light. Large, dark eyes gazed dolefully towards them, and its ears twitched this way and that as Yash continued to click. It was remarkably thin. The shape of its features was clearly visible under the skin, and its limbs trembled slightly. It limped towards Yash awkwardly, keeping one hooved foot raised off the ground as it came. As it neared the group, the deep wound that it carried on one leg became visible. "What is it?" Goldlaw asked, his voice a soft rumble. Yash waited until the adult deer had settled itself beside its fawn before he responded. "It's a musk deer," he explained gently, keeping his voice low so as not to startle the animals. "The fawn is probably about 6 weeks old." With his free hand, Yash opened the small package onto his lap, revealing a thick, brown paste. "And that?" "Lotion," Yash replied, "made with neem roots." He was struggling to hold the clump of long leaves in one hand and the paste in the other. "Here, hold this." He held out the leaves to Goldlaw, who hesitated before stepping forwards, his large boots crunching on the rocky ground. Goldlaw crouched beside Yash, his smart suit now noticeably dusty. Looking disconcerted and utterly out of place, he took the foliage and held it out for both creatures to graze on. "What's wrong with it?" he asked, looking at the injured mother. Yash dipped 2 fingers into the paste and, very gently, applied it to the wound on the adult's leg. His kind hands worked expertly, and the deer hardly moved, such was the carefully built trust between them. Yash sighed. Musk deer are poached for their scent. The males have a gland in their abdomen that creates a perfume, and hunters kill them for it. You can tell that this one's female, he said, gesturing at the deer's muzzle, because the tusks are only small. He wiped his hand on a tuft of grass and folded up the wrappings from the lotion. This one was hit by accident. She's no use to hunters, but she can't take care of her young while she's hurt. I've never heard of them, Goldlaw said bluntly. They're very rare, Yash continued. They're almost completely nocturnal, usually. They stay as far from humans as they can. He shot Goldlaw a disgusted glance. But the more we take, the less choice they have. There was a few minutes' pause, punctuated by the sound of Goldlaw's heavy breathing. When Yash turned to look at him, he saw what looked like a furious battle taking place behind the man's eyes. Sensing an opportunity, he continued. They live on the mountain because humans don't build their homes and cities up here. The mountain gives them water to drink, shelter from the wind and rain, and food to eat. Even the tree root in this medicine was grown on the mountain. Let's pause there and talk about Goldlaw's character. Here, on pages 41 and 42, there's some evidence that Mr. Goldlaw's character is changing. Here's a page from Chapter 2 where we first met Goldlaw. Take a look at Goldlaw's speech on this page. And I don't care what the mayor's man says, offer him 3 million and no more. If he doesn't like it, tell him I'll put that money into running against him in the next election. See how he likes that. Ha! Boy, is there not another truck or something to drive us to this base camp? I'm not interested in how you do it, just make it happen. I don't want to hear the word can't, do you understand me? There's a lot of speech from Goldlaw in this chapter, and he's telling people what to do. Even the one question that he asks is a demand. Now, though, on page 42, look at Goldlaw's speech again. What is it? And that? I've never heard of them. On this page, Yash gives Goldlaw a job to do, holding some leaves for the deer to graze on, and Goldlaw does as he's told without arguing. What do you think is happening to Goldlaw's character? Pause the video here and write down your ideas. Well done. There is a lot less speech from Goldlaw now than there was earlier. He's stopped talking and telling and has started listening and asking questions. Where before he thought that his opinion was the most important and that nobody else's opinion was worth listening to, now he's started to show that he wants to learn about things he doesn't understand. I'd also like you to notice the words that the author has used to describe the way that Goldlaw is speaking. When a character is speaking, the author has a choice and doesn't have to use the word said. The words that they choose make a big difference to the characters in the book. Here's another page from back when we first met Goldlaw. The way that Goldlaw spoke back then was loud and rude. We can tell because he shouts and barks. Now, though, there are clues to suggest that he's speaking less rudely to people. Pause the video and write down some evidence that you can find from page 41 that Goldlaw is thinking more carefully about the sounds he makes and the way that he speaks to people. Well done. Let's keep reading. Goldlaw gazed down at the fawn's beautiful head as it chewed calmly through a pile of leaves, and then at the mother, whose flank Yash was stroking gently. Will it survive? He asked gruffly. Yash gritted his teeth. Perhaps, if she isn't disturbed, he replied shortly. Before Goldlaw could retort, a distant sound from far below them disturbed the quiet. A muffled rumbling, like thunder, seemed to roll towards them through the mountain, and was followed by the rustling of hundreds of wings, as flocks of birds fled the local woodland, soaring upwards. The deer panicked. The fawn scrambled upwards and cowered behind its mother, who kicked out in an attempt to stand before Yash reacted and held her still. Goldlaw's eyes widened and he looked down at his watch. "My detonation!" he cried, jumping to his feet. "Idiot!" Yash hissed, but Goldlaw wasn't listening. He was stabbing the screen of his mobile phone with his large fingers, but when he raised it to his ear, nothing happened. "No signal, Mr. Goldlaw?" asked Yash bitterly. Goldlaw scowled and thrust his phone back into his pocket. "We have to leave," he said sharply, and turned to walk back towards the mountain path. He had only taken a few steps towards the tree line when he stopped. A new sound had broken the silence. A faint pitter-patter became gradually audible, and a small cloud of dust and dirt rained down the steep slope beside them, landing very close to Goldlaw's feet. He and Yash looked up towards the mountain's summit, and horror froze them both to the spot. Before I turn over, I want you to write down what you think has happened. What do you think is causing the rocks to fall and the ground to rumble? Pause the video and write down what you think. Well done. Goldlaw has just said, "My detonation," and looked at his watch. It's his fault that this has happened. His detonation has gone ahead while he's still on the mountain. Let's keep reading. Rocks the size of small cars were rolling down the bumpy hillside in all directions. They picked up speed and bounced higher with every strike of the ground, thudding and smashing into trees and bringing earth and rocks of all size pouring down after them. Shaking himself out of his momentary stupor, Yash jumped to his feet and scooped up the fawn. Shoving it into Goldlaw's arms, he yelled, "Take this!" Goldlaw was backing away from the edge of the platform, flattening himself against the wall created by the fold in the side of the Jagurdwa, and held the terrified animal tight to his chest. The injured musketeer was on her feet. Yash grasped her around the middle and staggered towards Goldlaw, seconds before the first enormous boulder, almost the size of the sage's house, ploughed through the ground above them and slammed into the spot where the deer had lain. Unhindered, the rock rolled over the edge of the outcrop and continued to gouge a path down the mountainside. Yash only had a moment to wonder if the rock would land near the village before a wave of debris cascaded over them. He and Goldlaw cowered like mice as dirt, stones, and tree trunks alike tumbled down, bouncing over the ledge above their heads and crashing to the ground at their feet. They clamped their eyes and mouths shut against a barrage of dust and shards of stone. Sound ripped through the air as more and more enormous stones came barreling down the side of the Jagurdwa. They were heading down towards the valley, each one becoming a marauding monster of rocks, trees, soil, mud, dust, and anything else that could be swallowed up in its path. The noise increased. Clouds of dust billowed into the air above the moving mass. Below them, Yash could hear trees in their path being knocked over like skittles. Fear coursed through him like ice. A single hit from one boulder would be enough to crush them all. There was nothing to do but hold on tight and wait. Gradually, the ground beneath their feet stopped shaking, and the thudding and rumbling from further down the mountain became more distant. When the sound of the rockfall had died away enough to hear Goldlaw's coughing and spluttering by his side, Yash dared to open his eyes and squint around through the dust. The small rocky platform in front of them had all but been destroyed. Piles of ground-up rock, splintered wood and soil had landed inches away from the group and were still pouring like sand over the edge, which had cracked under the impact at some point in the last few minutes and had fallen away, leaving a sheer drop mere yards from their feet. Yash glanced over the brink of the ledge, and what he saw made his blood run cold. The area below was devastated. The slope of the Jagurdwa had been deformed. At least 10 different paths had been scored down the side of the mountain's face, cutting through forest, stream, and farmland like a hot knife through butter. In all directions, remnants of trees and hillside were still falling down into the valley, picking up more debris all the time. The question was, how much of Yash's village had been lucky enough to escape? Just as hot, panicked tears began to well in the corner of Yash's eyes, a soft, wispy voice floated through the collecting dust towards him. "Come along, Yashaswin." That's the end of chapter 5. Before we go, I'd like you to think about what has happened to Mr. Goldlaw in this chapter and how that might have affected him. What do you think his experiences have taught him? How do you predict that this might change his behaviour? Pause the video and write down a prediction for what Mr. Goldlaw might do next, and why. Well done! That's the end of our 5 daily reading videos on this story. There are more questions and activities that you can do after watching the video. Just click on the link in the description below to download the activity sheet. There's one more chapter in this book. It would be a good idea to read Chapter 6 by yourself or with an adult. Click on the link in the description below to download the ebook. Or if you'd like to hear the rest of the story read to you, there's another link in the description which will take you to the final reading video. Thanks for joining me for daily reading. See you again soon.